So Shazam 2 follows the events of Shazam 1 that we saw in 2019. Billy Batson still turns into adult superhero Shazam, but now his whole foster family does it with him, save for the parents, of course, who are completely oblivious that all of the kids they watch all turn into superheroes and fly around and save Philadelphia. Philadelphia is, of course, worth mentioning here because it's very much the setting of Shazam 2, much more than New York City in Scream 6, I'm happy to say. Like, it actually feels like they actually shot out there and did things. Philly is overtaken by a giant dome and an evil force when three mystical gods, or goddesses, I should say, arrive from an alternate universe of history and lore and mythology and Greek monsters, minotaurs and cyclopses, all that kind of thing, to steal what I believe is a wizard's staff that then it turns into the apple of Eden that they got to plant to grow a thing. Honestly, it's a little complicated.
Yeah, it gets super complicated.
It gets really complicated. But what's important to know is Shazam, I think, has always been a bit lighthearted, right? A bit goofy, a bit comic booky. And Shazam Fury of the Gods firmly plants a foot in that direction by saying, look, we're not the Dark Knight. We're not the new Superman movie. We're certainly not a Zack Snyder film. We're something all our own. We're Shazam. And the question is, can Shazam 2 manage to grab and hold on to what Shazam 1 had? Andy, what'd you think?
So there are things in this movie that work, and there's a lot that doesn't. It was kind of middle of the road, but it wasn't terrible. It wasn't like Black Adam where I was just like bored and rolling my eyes. I think it has a strong cast and strong characters, but just the plot is all over the place. Like, as you were explaining it, I was having trouble remembering because it's so convoluted. It's so complicated. The daughters of Atlas come down and they have to get this thing and then get this person and then break this thing and then plant that thing. And it's all excuses for, to use a lot of CGI effects, which don't look all that great. But there are parts that work. It's really funny. I think there are a lot of good jokes that land. I didn't have a very full theater, but it would work pretty well in a larger theater. But just the plot is just all over the place, and I just couldn't really follow it. And I love this stuff. Like I've read Shazam comic books. Like I'm very familiar with this genre, and I love it. And I was still like, what is going on?
I do want to talk about like this movie's positioning in the comic book like fervor that people have kind of fallen out of, it seems, lately, along with where it is after Black Adam. We talked about that a little bit last week, but I want to talk about it more towards the end of this review. For now, let's talk about the film, right? That's what's important. So Billy Batson is growing up, all right? And he's soon going to age out of his foster home and doesn't really know his direction, right? The movie actually opens with him talking to a pediatrician, like a therapist, about this kind of imposter syndrome. Like, hey, I'm supposed to be the leader of these group of superheroes now, and there's all these other superheroes like Superman and Aquaman and Wonder Woman, but I don't feel like I match up to any of them. And then as a foster kid, I don't feel like I can really hang with everybody else, right? The movie doesn't really continue to run into any of that. It actually pivots right around there to Freddie Freeman, who is played by Jack Dylan Grazer in the movie. You might remember him. He's from the first movie. He's the kid with the crutch, handicap, and then he turns into Adam Brody. He calls himself Captain Every Power in this movie, which is funny. And this movie really is kind of his movie, which is weird. Asher Angel, who plays Billy Batson, he's got like 4 scenes out of like Shazam mode, which is Zachary Levi, right? Meanwhile, Jack Dylan Grazer is all over this feature. He falls for a girl at school, and it turns out that is a bit of a ruse, and he ends up being kidnapped, and he loses his Shazam power, and Billy and friends have to save him. He gets a lot of opportunity to kind of like flourish on screen and do exciting things. Meanwhile, our 3 villains, I should
this
say,
is getting so complicated.
It's getting really complicated. I know. I'm sorry. I'll wrap it up. Our 3 villains, played by Helen Mirren, Lucy Liu, and Rachel Ziegler, a newcomer from West Side Story, all arrive, and they are there to dominate Philly, which is weird, and take back the power that Shazam
Blue sky
given. Beam. Yes, that's the whole thing. Yeah, that you can't see in any exterior shots, like, because it's just a blue sky, unless they actually fly up to it, and then you can see the barrier. But it's fine. It's cheaper CGI that way. They are there to antagonize and mess things up. And what's weird is, like, I felt like a lot of that would play like in a normal setting for a comic book feature. If this movie came out 5-10 years ago, like I said with Ant-Man, like it would be fine. Like, and there's creatures at the end and CGI and magic powers and that's a wizard and that's all great. But like, I just don't like, it's just hard to care and it just feels complicated. And I can't tell if I'm getting old or like the formula's getting old, right? Andy, what'd you think?
I don't think it's easy. I think this is just the plot is so all over the place, and it's like it was written with the intent of like you just using a lot of CGI because our characters are fun. Like everyone you were naming, Asher Angel, Jack Dylan Grazer, Adam Brody, the rest of the family dynamic in Shazam is really fun. But the plot's just not going anywhere. Helen Mirren is very good, though. I did want to say that she's like treating this like it's Shakespeare, which she's a saint for doing. Like she really hams up all her lines. Great delivery. Meanwhile, Lucy Liu is phoning it in. Like, she's so bland and so checked out. It's funny because I remembered her voice from one of the Star Wars Visions thing, and I was like, oh, that's where that bland voice came from. Rachel Zegler is fine as Anthea. She's kind of underutilized. I think there's almost too many people or too many villains, especially in this movie. Of course, the great Jaimin Hansu as the wizard Shazam is also in again. So we have really fun characters. We just don't know how to kind of put them together in a meaningful way. The movie tries to introduce some plot devices or some overarching themes of like imposter syndrome or like Billy's afraid he's going to lose his family when he ages out of the foster program. But like these things are introduced and then put on ice for the whole movie until the very end. It's really bizarre.
Yeah, like the first film had this whole like plot device, Billy Batson like literally going around to houses like with a list of names like the Terminator and knocking on the doors and seeing if it was his mom, like who had left him when he was a kid because he was trying to find her because he was trying to find like acceptance. And like that actually was surprisingly well put together. But this ends up just coming off a bit more as like, you know, a teen love story. Like Jack Dylan Grazer just falls head over heels for this girl. And it's really hokey. And like those bits feel particularly cheesy. They're alleviated a bit by, I think, some of like the superhero stuff. Zachary Levi, who plays Shazam, has a lot of opportunity to walk around in this big goofy suit with all the other like supers like in the family who are all there in their goofy suits. And they're hanging out in the Rock of Eternity, which is like their headquarters, right? There's the first time you see it, this big neon signs lair. Like the teens had put up, and it looks like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles like sewer hangout. And in there's like a mystical door that opens up to millions of other doors, and there's like a giant library with a pen that writes whatever you want, and like that I think gives like a lot of substance to like have some funny moments and like have actually a couple like clever fights. Like there's one scene where a monster bursts through one thing. It's like that all I think kind of works. But like the drama outside of that's real dry, and it's not, it doesn't help because the plot is like phenomenally complicated, like much more than it needs to be for what's actually happening. Like I said, I at one point I realized the villains and the heroes were like both chasing after an item. I didn't actually know what the thing did. Like I don't know, I've lost the plot, and I've seen a lot of movies, right? Like I feel like I should be able to keep up okay. It's just a little too complex.
Yeah, there's just way too much going on. Like I said, there's too many characters, I think, overall. In the first one, the family was a little bit more in the background, but now they're all kind of superheroes. And so it's just a lot of people to keep up with and have on screen. That also leads to just a lot of not great looking CGI. There are a bunch of CGI monsters that eventually pop up. There's like this big tree that's like spreading throughout the city, and it's just like kind of overkill. There's this wooden dragon. None of it looks super good, and it's just excuse to have our superheroes do something. It's just kind of bad. Also, the product placement in this movie is like shameless, absolutely shameless.
Yeah, it's rough.
Zach, take it away.
No, you're absolutely right. Like the product placement feels like a cheap TV show, which is funny because that's where Zachary Levi gets all his experience, right? Like playing Chuck on the NBC sitcom Chuck. He did that for years. And he definitely falls into that role really well as like the hapless everyman who now has this like greatness thrust upon him and has to try to like figure out how to make it work. And he's funny and he's like humble, but like he just comes off as a little dumber than I think he was in the first movie.
He's so dumb. Yeah.
It's the Ash from Evil Dead problem, right? And every subsequent Evil Dead movie, Ash gets dumber up to like Army of Darkness when he's like one of the Three Stooges. Whereas the first one, he's like a reasonable college kid who's like got a head on his shoulders. The second one, a little goofy but tough. Like, and this one he's kind of in that space. Like he's tough, but like he's not that funny. Like a lot of his lines don't really land. Like, whereas in the first one, I felt like, okay, like he's he's a kid and he's growing up, but like they don't thread that needle as good here. Like he feels a little too disconnected from like his Billy Batson counterpart, who again is barely on screen. Like, God, I feel bad for Asher Angel. Like he must have gone to set so many days seeing Jack Dylan Grazer on like the call sheet.
Yeah.
just never on there, man. It's crazy.
Yeah, Jack Dylan Grazer has the real drama, the real world problems. He is worried about aging out of the foster program, being kicked out of the house and the family when that happens. He's worried about the imposter syndrome of not feeling like a superhero. But yeah, for some reason they make when he turns into Shazam, he's like a moron and he acts like a 13-year-old, not like a 17 or 18-year-old, and it's really bizarre. And the thing is, the comics aren't like that. Like Billy Batson is, a younger person, but he's not a moron. And also in the comics, they kind of just keep him in Shazam form most of the time because that's a little bit easier to deal with. But they've gone with this, big, like the movie Big, dynamic for this, and it's like kind of starting to not work.
Yeah, it really isn't. I do think, like, one more thing I want to say, like, I do think this movie does make an honest stab at being a quality comic book feature in a way that a lot of comic book movies don't, right? Like, I feel like a lot of comic book movies, especially on the Marvel side, will harken back to elements from the comics, but they kind of phone it in. Doesn't really reach out and grab it. Whereas I feel like a lot of the things that happen in Shazam are probably very honest to Shazam comics, which I haven't read, so maybe I'm wrong. But like the Rock of Eternity, like their lair, right, where the whole Shazam family hangs out. The whole Shazam family, right? Like all of them being there and having adequate screen time. Like they feel like their own little like Avengers or Justice League. Steve, the pen that writes all their magical letters for them, like Shazam's ability to bounce in and out at will, like all of that feels very much like it came right off the page. But I just don't think people want that anymore. Like I don't, like I don't care. That's not enough to get me excited. I need something different. Like same is not good enough anymore.
Shazam was a character that he needed his own solo movie that we got to introduce the character, but then he should kind of be a side character from here on out. That's how he is in the comics. He's largely part of the larger group efforts, but and I think more recently he's probably had some solo runs, but he works better as a supporting superhero.
Yeah, and if you get Shazam as like a supporting hero in a movie, like you probably get away with not even hiring Asher Angel. He'll just use a Zachary Levi version, right? Like that'll be the whole thing, which is again criminal because he's fine in the first movie, but like they just went in a different direction. Overall,
I think that's what'll happen from here on out if they use this character again. They're just going to leave him in Shazam form.
One more thing I want to talk about for recommendations, though I feel like if you're listening, you probably have an idea of where we're headed with this. I want to talk about this movie's position, like after Black Adam. Last week, I kind of asked about it. I said, Andy, what do you think? Well, Andy had seen it last week when we did the show. We just kind of did real quick, soft first impressions. And I asked where you thought it was, like following Black Adam and how Black Adam might have affected this movie. There's been a bit of a dust up like online since with Zachary Levi making an Instagram post saying that The Rock, functionally saying The Rock tanked this movie. Like The Rock decided he wasn't going to be at the end of it, and Shazam was not going to show up in the Rock movie. There's going to be two different things. And I wonder, do you think Black Adam took some of the bluster of this? Is it just that it was 4 freaking years and the pandemic like lost all the smoke for Shazam? Like what's happening? Why do you think people are just not, or is it the format? Is it people just don't care about this comic book thing anymore?
I think it took too long to come out. 4 years after the original, it needed to come out 2 or 3 years. I think it's kind of all of the above. The Rock complicating things. Black Adam is the nemesis of Shazam. He's the one who should be in this movie. He was supposed to be in the first movie, and then The Rock got involved and didn't want to play with the smaller name people and superheroes. So I think that's definitely hurt things. Luckily, The Rock has kind of, because Black Adam did so poorly, I don't think anyone really wants to work with him or think he's, just let him call the shots. I don't think people are tired of superhero movies. They're tired of mediocre ones, that's for sure. And other movies are doing better things. They're like, things like Top Gun or Avatar or John Wick or Scream. You got other movies trying to raise the quality of what they do to kind of compete with it.
One thing's for sure, like it is nothing short of hilarious how bad like the Black Adam bag fumble has turned out for Dwayne Johnson. Like he's come off as a villain so bad. I think a lot of people are starting to turn on that like warm impression they had of him. They're like, oh yeah, Dwayne Johnson's a great guy. Now they're like, I don't know, man. Like he kind of grabbed the Black Adam situation, did not work out. And apparently he was tough to work with on Fast and Furious. And like, I don't know. Like he's starting to turn into a bit of a diva, behind the scenes.
Yeah, absolutely. He was calling the shots on who could and couldn't be in his movie and who could be in others. Like he said he wasn't going to show up in the Shazam movie. And then just way too much control for someone who's not proven in the superhero space.
So what got Edward Norton thrown out for a while. He was real finicky about being in the editing room on all of his movies. And after he did Hulk, Marvel was like, we're not doing this. And pushed him back a ways. But regardless, we got to talk about whether or not Shazam's worth seeing. Andy, would you recommend Shazam: Fury of the Gods?
I would say save it for streaming. Definitely, if you're a fan, if you're a comic book fan, you've probably already seen it. If you're unsure, just wait till it's on HBO Max. There's no reason to run out and see it. It does have good characters and a good cast. They're just kind of wasted on a plot that's confusing and doesn't really go nowhere.
Yeah, same boat. Wait for streaming, like if you want to see it. Honestly, I don't think there's anything here that's like really stellar. You need to turn it on and watch it anyway. But when it comes out, I mean, if you like the first Shazam, and a lot of people did, very warm reception on the first Shazam. Like throw in a little laundry and put this on. You'll be fine. You fold clothes while you watch Shazam: Fury of the Gods. If anything, seeing it on a small screen might help the CGI.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes things look better on TV on the small screen than they do on the big screen, and vice versa.
Yeah. Watch Shazam: Fury of the Gods best watched on your phone for sure.
Yeah.
In portrait mode. With that, we should wrap the show. Andy, what are we watching next week?
Portrait mode.